everybody, it's Jenny from the Missouri Star Quilt Company, and it is month 11. It is our finishing month, and I honestly think that for most of us, 2020 has been kind of a rough year, and this has kind of kept me going because I've had something to look forward to every single month, and I'm super excited today because we get to put our whole quilt together. Now you want to get comfortable because this is going to be a longer video. It takes a little bit longer time to put a whole quilt together than it does to make a block, but we're going to do it, and this is our box right here. This is the box 11, and hopefully you all have it, and we're going to open it up and look inside. All right, first thing we have is our finishing up pattern, which means you're going to be able to fill your whole little pattern keeper up with all the patterns, and you're going to have this entire quilt here. Now, the reason I mention that is because I've actually made this quilt, I don't know, at least half a dozen times, probably more, because I love this pattern. I really do love this pattern. And so it's been fun for me, and it's nice to have them all in one place. All right, there's a surprise. Okay, so the first surprise, this is a thank you from Missouri Star for quilting services. So if you send your quilt to us, this block of the month quilt, you'll get 10% off. That's pretty cool. More surprises. Oh, you get some binding clips and a little tiny needle in here. So the little top bag, don't miss this little top bag because it has a needle, and it's a little John James needle. I like John James. I know this is weird, but I tend to break needles a lot, you know, when I'm binding. I don't know if it's how I hold them or what. And so the John James is like a stainless steel, very, very sturdy needle, and I really like it. So then we have our 2.5-inch strips, our 1.5-inch strips, and this is our border fabric right here. All of these things are in the bottom of this box. All right, let's open up our little pattern and take a look at where we are. And so the first thing is that from the time you make these blocks until we put them together, I just want you to be aware, if yours are not exactly the same size or something like that, just try it first and see how it works, and we'll put it together. Also, I did a lot of going back to the other patterns because when something didn't fit, I was like, why doesn't this match up? And I'd go back to the pattern, and it turned out that I forgot to add a little piece, or I hadn't squared the block, or something like that. So don't be afraid to check those things. All right, so for the first row of our quilt, we are going to have, we're going to start with this block in the corner, and I'm going to be up and down a lot here using my board. And I want to look, make sure where my little strip goes. My little strip, this little 1-inch strip right here is going to go to the side like this. And here's a note. On this, I kind of quilt by pictures, you know, so what I really do is I look at the pictures, and then if I can't figure it out from the pictures, I go back to the, you know, to reading it. But I really am I really do quilt by pictures. So that's the first block, and this is the last block. And now this center area right here has several blocks in it, and we need to put those together before we can do a block. So the first one we have this little star ribbon block right here, that one. And this you should have a border on 2 sides of this one. And then we have these 2 other pieces. And so we have the pink wonky star, and we have the green, that's better, the green patch star. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew these 2 together, and you really want to look at your pictures and make sure that they are lined up right. So this one goes, you have your side piece out here. You know what, I probably don't need both of these. Let me put this one over here. I had one out because I was looking at it, so I would refresh my mind. And so we're going to sew these 2 together like this. Now, my block looks a little bit bigger, so I want to look at it, and I want to make sure that it actually is the right size, because maybe I didn't square it, you know, maybe it wasn't quite the right size. And let's see here. Mine is just a hair bigger than it should be, and so I'm going to square it up. These blocks square up to 6.5. And so I'm just going to take a little off the edge here. And a lot of times this happens, you know, I speak unfinished, and most of the quilting world speaks finished. And so what we want to do is, this block should be 6.5, so I am going to trim this up right here. And then I'm going to turn it and make sure it's 6.5 both directions. And I'm just a little bit long here too. So we're going to come here and trim that up. Now this one should match perfectly now with this block here. This has a little 1-inch strip on it. It's going to go toward the top, and we are going to put this on the top like this. So now they fit up exactly, and we're going to sew these two together. And just sew straight down. All right, now I'm going to press this open. All right, so now we've got these all nice and ironed, and they should match up to this side. Now remember, this piece right here goes across the top and the side. Your pink star should have its extra piece off to the side. The green star should have the piece of the middle. And we should be able to put these together. Now it looks like my piece right here is just a little bit long, but I'm pretty sure if I put my big piece to the bottom, I will be able to make it work. So the feed dogs take in more fabric, and so we're just going to sew this along here, and we are going to, I'm going to keep kind of a firm hold on the top so that it, you know, try to make it fit, and let the feed dogs do their work and take in that extra little bit of fabric. Now you may find you have to square some of your blocks, or you know, something to make them work. You may find that that is the case. If that is the case, that's what you got to do. All right, so now I've got these two together, and I'm going to press them. Now I'm going to take my big star over here, and I'm going to see how this works. I know from the pattern that I'm going to need to add a piece to this bottom piece over here, but I want to look at how much I'm going to need to add. So it looked like for a moment I was way off, and then I realized I had this block turned. So take a good look at that. So right down here, you'll see in your directions, I've actually highlighted it here because we need to add a little strip of fabric. So we're going to add a 1.5-inch strip to that, and it's going to go all the way across the bottom of these two middle blocks, and that should make that line up with your block. If it doesn't, or yours is going to be a little bit short, just go ahead and add that other piece in there. What we're looking for is one continuous row. I'm going to lose 1/4 inch right there. This is my 1.5. It looks like I'm just going to cut one of my scrap pieces a little bigger into 2 inches. And you should have plenty of scrap in, you know, some of your other box for this, but hopefully yours will line up exactly. I'm actually kind of glad this is happening because it will let you know what to do just in case. So I'm going to trim this off at 2 inches. And then this piece gets sewn onto the bottom of this unit that we just put together. It should be a 1.5-inch strip by the pattern. Somehow mine is a little short. But you guys know, you know, we can make it work. We're make-do girls. All right. I should say make-do quilters, because we got some guys out there doing this. And I also know that my 1/4 inch isn't exact. All right, so now let's trim this off. And then I'm going to measure again to my block to make sure it lines up, because really it just has to go together on this row. It's not going to throw the rest of the quilt off at all. All right, I'm just going to trim all these little pieces off here. And then I'm going to attach this one to here. And it's going to be a little bit long, but I'm going to sew it from the top, and then I'll trim it off when I get them together. All right, so I'm going to add this on here, right here, like this, and make sure I've got it going the right way. You know what, you guys? I have to look at this like 20 times to make sure I get this going the right direction. And we're going to go this way, and then we're going to line it up on here. So don't feel like, you know, don't feel a little confused or a little flustered, because putting a quilt together is a big deal, and this one has lots of little components to it. Next year's, I think, is going to be a little easier, and I think you're going to love it. Just a little spoiler. I've been working on that for a while. All right. Ooh, we're really close on this. All right. So now I'm going to press this open. So probably I was only about 1/4 of an inch off, as it turns out, which I probably could have made work. So go ahead and try it how you have it, and then we will, oops, I need to press this whole thing down. And once these rows get big too, it's always good to have a big ironing space. I kind of get my ironing space by my desk, I kind of get to where I really love it, but it gets a little bit tiny sometimes. All right, we're going to grab this block and we're going to put it over here on this side. And also you want to make sure, like if you're really following the pattern, make sure that your colors are going in the right spots and that sort of thing. So this should go over here, and we should be able to sew this right down the side. And I can, except for my little piece. All right, here we go. So then we're just going to sew down this side. And it should match up pretty close, just 1/4 of an inch different. And it looks like that's what I've got right here. And so this is really our whole top row. So that went together pretty fast. I'm going to trim off this little middle part right here. I'm just going to kind of fold this and trim off this little part right here. And it looks like I've just got just a hair to trim. And I probably shouldn't fold this. Let me just go back. Let me back up. Let me back up and do it right. I tend to get a little bit, in a hurry sometimes, you know. I don't like you guys to have to wait so long, and so I tend to get a little bit in a hurry, but I don't need to do that because we are just sewing this together. And there's our 1.5 right there, and I'm just going to trim this off. And I'm measuring from this green border right here, and you can see the fabric isn't exactly perfectly straight. And so still 1.5. And then look, it matches up exactly down here with our block. Oh, hang on. Let me give this move this out a little bit. 1.5. Yep, there we go. All right. Now this part right here, nope, I'll be able to trim that off. There we go. All right. Now this is our first row, and just like that, we've got it. So we're going to hang it up here like this. And all the way across here, because we like to see what we've done. There we go. All right, now we're on to the second row. The second row has our great big Missouri star right in the middle of it. And I'm going to grab that pile right here. I think that's this pile, actually. And we're going to turn the page, and we're going to go to the second row. Now on this one, we have this little green block and this yellow block here that has its a little border around it. And the first thing we're going to do is sew a 2.5 inch strip. We're going to sew these two together first. And so look and make sure your pieces are on the right side. And we're going to sew this one to this one. And it matches up exactly. Hooray! It's always a good time when it matches up exactly, right? All right, so we're going to match this up exactly and sew down the side. All right, now I'm going to press this open, and then I'm going to add a 2.5 inch strip across the top. Now that strip should be in our box. And so we're going to do this, and then our strip is going to go, wait, turn it. Our strip is going to go right across the top here. So I'm going to look in here, and it looks like you don't have one, but there it is right in the middle of all the binding. Okay, So now what I'm going to do, this should be 2.5 by 17. Let me measure and see how close I am. I am 17.5. Perfect. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissor right here, and I'm going to cut off my little selvage end right here. And then I'm just going to take this and sew this across the top, and I will just trim that when I'm done. So I'm not actually cutting it to 17. You can do that if you want to. But I'm just going to sail along here like this. Because I measured my block, I know it's 17. And then I'm going to trim this off right here. I'm going to leave it folded, and I'm going to take my little ruler, and I'm just going to line it right up along this edge. Trim those little threads off and open it up, and then we'll press this open. And this is the first part of the second row. Then we have another little unit to put together. So we grab this block right here, another 4-patch star, and 2 little wonky stars, and they should be over here. And it looks like these little wonky stars, we're just going to sew the purple on top of the gold. Now these ones, you want to make sure that they are squared to 6.5. I'm going to give that guy a little press. And then we're going to measure them up and make sure they're squared to 6.5. Because on some of these, yeah, see, mine's not quite 6.5, and I think these blocks are all squared to 6.5. So we're going to take a little bit off here, this side, and a little bit off of this side here. So that should be 6.5 right there, and it is, and this one, 6.5. So we're not taking much off. We're just taking little bits off. And actually, most of you probably did this when you sewed them. I'm always so excited to finish a block that I'm like, oh, I'm done, and I just put it in there, and I don't actually measure it. So if you haven't measured yours, these will need to be squared up to 6.5. And there's plenty of room to do that. You can do that on any side. And you'll notice I'm only doing it on 2 sides because there's so much room for my legs that it doesn't take up any more room. All right, so purple on top and yellow on the bottom. We're going to seam those together. So we're going to just sew these right down the side. And then these should match up perfectly. Whoop, let's press them. To this pink one right here. Now the pink is going to go the wide part on the bottom and the 1-inch border on the side, and these should match up just perfectly along here. And again, I'm a little bit longer, but I'm going to just put my longer piece on the bottom. That's a super handy tip for you guys. Put your big piece to the bottom and then keep a firm hand on the top and let the feed dog take in that other fabric. And it should just come together just pretty close. And don't worry if it's off a little bit, because if it's off a little bit, you can always catch that in the 1/4-inch seam. All right, so here's this piece. Let me press it out. And then this piece, like this, is going to get attached to this piece. So, and look at that. That is going to be perfect. Yay! Always a good moment. All right, we're going to put this along here. And we're just going to sew our 1/4 inch right there. We don't have to adjust anything because it's just going to go on here just right perfect. And then we're going to press that. Now the big test is coming up because we've got to attach this to our big center block, which always feels a little daunting. But let me just straighten up my mess here a little bit so I have a little bit more room. All right, now here's our middle block. our nice big Missouri star. I'm going to move this pattern so I can still see it. And then this one should go right to this side over here. And let's look at it. So we should go, yep, that's right. And this should match up to this. And look at that, it does. All right, so now what we're gonna do is I'm going to fold this over and I'm gonna attach this to my big center square. All right, and I'm just gonna get started and then I'm gonna kind of reline everything up. Nothing really matches. You're not matching any seams on this. So no stress about that, which is kind of nice. And then I always like to check down here to make sure that I'm coming out pretty close. And I'm just coming out exactly. And for as casual as of a sewer as I am, I love it when that happens. It's just like this serendipitous moment. It's like, oh. All right, we have this much done. I'm gonna stick it up here like this. Oh. Gonna have to put a pin in it. All right, now we need to put this next section together right here. So the last section, it has the Ohio Star, and I'm gonna give that a little press. And the Ohio Star goes on the top, and we have some borders on this one, and it looks like our smaller borders go top and bottom, and the little bit wider ones go on the side. Now we have our little, another 4-patch and another little wonky star over here. This goes in the middle with the piece on the side. And this one goes to the side. And this looks like I didn't exactly square it either. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Even though it already has borders on it, I can still take this and trim it so that it's, so this should measure. So what I'm measuring from is this little seam right here. And really, let this be a lesson to you, because we should square up all of our blocks as we go along. And so see, this should be 6.5, but I have plenty of room to bring that in. So I'm just going to take it right off the side right here and come to my half. And I still have plenty of room for my star points. And so I'm just going to take that off right like that. And I've cut right through the border, you know, which is, it has to be because that's the way it is. And then I'm going to look at it again and make sure that I don't need to square it going the other direction as well. So we're this way. And these two actually match up pretty close. And then I'm going to sew these two together, and then we're going to look and see how it fits to our star block. And if you have squared all your blocks, you know, as you go along, this shouldn't be, you know, you won't have to do what I'm doing. I'm always a really good example of what not to do. All right. All right, so now looks like we're going to come pretty close on this. So I'm going to take this and sew this to this side. And if I have any extra at all, I'll know that I needed to trim that other side of my block, and I can just trim it off then. So we are going to sew this down over here. It looks like I am going to have to square that little block, that little wonky star. To me, those are so tiny, and I'm always surprised that they're not. I mean, I always use my stuff how they are, and I don't generally square them to a size. So this pattern for me was as much of a learning experience as it is for you, because I make one block and then I just make it 42 times. Now see how this is like sticking out? Exactly a ½ inch, which is what I should have squared it to. All right, here we go. Just trim that off, and then we're going to press this back, and then we can add it to our center row. Right here. And then this should fit right there, and it looks like it's going to be perfect. All right. All right, here's this. We're going to put this on here, and let me make sure my little stars go at the bottom, and they do. Yep, that's right. All right. So I know there are a few of you out there that quilt by picture like I do. We look at the pictures. If we can figure it out, that's great. If we can't, we read the directions. And I know there's a few of you because you've told me. We're getting so close to Christmas. The weather here is even cooling down. Okay, here's another trick. Now this is not lining up exactly, but it's very close, but there's a little bit, tiny bit of play on the bottom here. So I am stopping where I am, I'm flipping it over, and I'm letting my big piece be on the bottom because I know the feed dogs will take that up. So I line it up exactly on the edges exactly together, and then I'm just gonna sew this down here, and I'm just gonna keep a hold of it snugly. And then just like that, it all matches up. Perfect. All right, so let me press this seam. And then we have our second row done, and we're all ready to the third. How cool is that? So now we're just gonna press down our seam and get it ready to put up on the board, and we will have 2 rows done. All right, so let me look here. Looks like this, this side goes over here. Yep. We're going to put a pin in there. We're going to put this across here like this. Look at that. There's our second row. So we are on to row 3, and I know this has been your favorite block. Actually, it was fun to learn. It was a challenge. It was a challenge for all of us, but we did it at the end of the day. We did it, and regardless of how perfectly or imperfectly it came out, you know, we learned a new skill, and it's going to look beautiful in the quilt, and people are going to be just amazed. So this is the first block. The second block is the little Jenny star and Jenny's block, and then our little pink star. And so those have to go together, and it looks like this piece is at the top, and this is at the bottom, and we're just going to sew these together like this. All right. So I'm just going to lay these together, and they match right up. I must have squared that one. All right, now let's see if this actually fits with our big block, and it goes this way. And so here's our block, and we're going to put it on there, and it looks pretty good. Pretty good. All right, so now we're going to sew this onto here and line it up on the corner. Sew down the side. Now you do want to be careful on this. We have a lot of little seams here, and because they've been sitting now for months, you know, it's easy for those little ends of them to come unthreaded. So just watch that those don't come apart when you're sewing them. I have one here on the bottom, and I'm just going to make sure that it lays down, and I sew over it, and it will just keep it closed. One of the reasons we don't backstitch in quilting is because every seam is enclosed in another seam, but really we don't generally leave our blocks for a whole year. Well, some of us maybe. Or maybe if you're doing a block of the month, you know. All right, so here we go. It's like, stop goofing around and get it done. All right, I'm going to press that seam. All right, so we're going to get these all ironed together. So nice. And then we're on to the next part. All right, the next part is the studio star and the little green star. And the little green star should have its pieces on the side and its wide piece on the bottom. The studio star should have one little bead off to the side. And we're going to put those together, and they should fit right together. So let's do that. Right here, get them lined up. And you just might, I always kind of take a few anchoring stitches, and then I check down here at the end to make sure they're still lined up. And if they're just a hair off, I just kind of put them together and make it fit. So, this one was pretty close, but it's, you know, it could use a little coaxing, just a little bit. All right, now this we're going to press open, And then we are going to attach it to this big yellow one. Now this is this big block goes at the very end of the quilt, and it should, we've put some big borders on it, and it should just match up perfect with this piece right here. Again, it's a little bit big, so I'm going to put this one on the top and let the feed dogs do their work. All right, here we go. A little bit of a, and then I'm going to take a hold of this top piece and let the feed dogs slide the bottom one through. Make sure this is lining up here. Coax it a little. It just comes out perfect. All right. Now we're going to attach this part to our middle, which are these stars right here. And it looks like these are going to line up pretty good. So we are going to do the same thing. Start with our piece that looks just a hair bigger. I don't know why it's a hair bigger. Those are one of the mysteries of the universe. Actually, no, if you square everything perfect, if you're a perfectionist, this is going to go together for you like clockwork. But I sew along the edge of my presser foot, and it's close to 1/4, I'm pretty sure, but that's just how I sew. So I'm just showing you how to get these things to go together when you're not a perfectionist, because truly my mantra, finished is better than perfect, comes into play in this quilt. And it's lining up perfectly. I love how that happens. All right, this is our last row. I'm going to iron these seams, and then we're going to put these together. And I kind of like to iron a little bit as I go. I'm not doing the big heavy ironing, the top ironing, but I want to make sure that my seams, that as I'm putting rows together, it's going to lay pretty flat. All right, so here's our bottom row right here. How cool is that? Oh, there we go. That's better. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to take the top 2 rows and I'm going to stick a pin in it right here and keep these 2 together. And I'm just going to go ahead and line them up. And I'm going to take a look right now and see how close this is going to be. This is going to be pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can pin if you want. And if I were pinning this, which maybe I will, I'll put a pin here right at the front, and I'll put a pin right at the tail, and then I'll put a pin right in the middle. But this looks like it's going to line up pretty good. So we shouldn't have too much trouble with it. So let me see where my middle is here. And so just line these up. Yeah, see, that's going to lay together real nice. And so I'm just going to stick a pin right there. And then we're going to put those together. Then always open up and look and make sure it is indeed going the right way. Because there's nothing worse than sewing a whole row and going, Actually, a friend of mine online already put her top together, and she said, "Oh, I made a boo-boo. Did any of you see it?" And everybody was looking for a mistake in a block, and it wasn't. It was that she had turned something when she said it. And I said, "You did not make a mistake. You made a whole new layout. We just have to go with the flow on those things." She also had a cool quote about that, and I'm going to share that with you in a little bit. Because to me, that's, it's just relax and enjoy the process. Now, one of the other things that's really fun about these quilts is that they can look, when you're done, you're like, yeah, it's okay. But when you get it quilted, they just look beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So to me, the quilting is the part that just gives it life. All right, now let me see how this is lining up. Nope, we're still lining up good. I was thinking I might have to flip it over. so the feed dogs could take in more fabric. Now the other thing I want to check as I go along here is I'm going to flip this over and make sure, really make sure that my seam caught on both sides. Because that's also one of those things. You'll get up and you'll be pressing it and you'll be like, oh, I missed that whole section. Because sometimes as we sew things along, nope, we're good. All right, so now we've got our 2 rows together and we're going to add our third. So I'm going to turn my 2 rows this way. Make sure I'm putting it on the right side and then grab this piece, this 3rd row, and we are going to add it. Let me make sure I'm doing this right now. Does this one go, let's see, there is the Ohio star, nope, it goes this way. There we go. All right, so, check that, make sure they're right. I generally tend to put all of mine up on the board, and then I put a pin in the corner where the side of each one is, but I haven't on this one. So the last row worked out so well, I'm just going to start sewing this one and not pin it, because that's generally how I roll. And I will get a little ways along here, and then I will check it. Now make sure your row is on right side up, and that it's doing what you want it to do. And we still don't really have a lot of stuff to match up on this. And if you have a block that's way too big or way too small, remember you can always add a little piece of background to it. No one's ever going to see that seam in there. They're not going to know that you did it. Okay, so look at this. So now in stretching this out, knowing I have this much more, this part right here is a little bit baggy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out and I'm going to flip it over and I'll put my baggy part to the bottom so that it will all even out. And I'm going to line this up and stick it under my needle and just sew. And now I'm just going to keep a good grip on this top piece right here. And sew along. And I have a couple of places where my seams, the first threads of my seams are coming out on this piece, so watch for those, because your blocks have easily been sitting as long as mine. And we're just gonna sew along here. Make sure that this all comes together. It is pretty amazing how when you see the feed dogs do their work. Now, if you ever have a time where they don't have enough room to come together, you can just take your seam out a little further and make sure that it comes together. All right. Now let's take a look at this. I'm going to check my seam. Looks like I caught it everywhere. Perfect. And this should be our finished little top. There you go. Oh, here we go. Over here. There you go. So here's our finished top. We are ready now to add our borders. So our first borders are going to be these little 1.5 inch borders right here. And what I do is I like to sew these together all at one time. So I'm gonna lay them like this, and I'm just gonna take my pieces and I'm gonna make sure I'm sewing right sides to right sides, and I'm gonna sew this, and then I'm just gonna bring this piece up like this and add the next one to it. And I'm gonna sew all these little strips together. You probably need about 7, and it gives you a measurement in your book to exactly the length to cut them. And but I still like to sew all my strips together, and then if you want to cut them, you can cut them. But I would measure the side of your quilt first. Make sure you measure it so that it matches, because if yours doesn't match, it isn't wrong. It's just your size, so don't stress about it. So I've got, what do I have, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I got plenty on there. I think it'll only take about maybe 7 strips. I'm not sure. It'll tell you in the pattern. And so now I'm just clipping these apart and clipping the selvages off as I go. And on a quilt, we always add our side borders first and then the top and bottom because it takes less fabric to do that. And so I'm going to find my sides, which means, let's see here. This is a side, and then we're going to go over here to this side. And I'm going to start on this side right here. And so basically, you can trim your borders to length and put your borders on and pin them so that they're all matched up and they're the right length for these. I am going to just sew them on. And the way I do that is that you want to make sure that your quilt is always on the bottom and your border is always on the top. Remember, the feed dog takes in more fabric. So if you put that border on the bottom and just sew it on, it will be very wavy and your quilter won't like that at all. So always have your sashing or your border piece on the top and just keep a firm grip on it. Let the feed dog take the quilt in. And then, but keep a firm grip on the top. Now there may be some places on here, I haven't come to one yet, but where it's not exactly, well right here. So see how this is just a little off right here? I know that I can catch that in that 1/4 inch seam. So I'm just going to lay that over. And I'm just going to keep on going down the side. And honestly, when I started quilting, I would just go here, 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 and I would just sew it all the way around. I didn't think it mattered, but I had a good quilting friend of mine told me that, you know, you always do the sides and then the top and bottom, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm trying to teach you the right way to do it. But there are no quilt police here, so it works for us, right? All right, so I'm going to get down here to this end. And then I'm going to cut this off, and then we're going to go do the other side. So I'm just going to trim this off right here at the end, and I just used my scissors to do that. We're going to come over here and come to the other side and put the other little side border on, like this. And grab my end piece. I'm going to just straighten up that cut. I have a little bit of a cut out of there. And we're going to sew down this side. And this little inner border, I love an inner border. I think it really sets the quilt off. You'll notice on most of my tutorials, I am inner border of 2.5, outer border 6. That's my default go-to. You know, but honestly, like say if you wanted to make this quilt big enough to fit your bed, if you just kept adding borders, that quilt is going to get really big really fast. So you know, whatever you want to do, keep in mind this is your quilt. Until you give it away, then it's not yours. Then you can't worry about what they do with it. You have to just let it go. All right. Ooh, for a minute there, I thought I was sewing it on the wrong side. But I was not. Stroke of luck right there. Sometimes when you get these prints that have these really light secondary prints on them, it is easy to get them turned around. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on the top and bottom and put this little border. So here we go. And again, I can see my little seam right here is just coming apart, so I'm just going to make sure that it stays together. Put my border piece over it and just kind of hold on to it till I get there, except I felt it move. And then we're just going to sew it down. And then that will keep that secure. I know a lot of you don't have big areas to sew, and so for me, I kind of do it all at my desk where I'm sitting. And then at the very end, I'll get up and iron the entire thing. And so I'm constantly shuffling and moving and fluffing and lining up, making sure it all keeps going together. But I will not iron this one before I add my next one. Now we have our inner border on. We're ready to add that outer border, and those should be 4.5-inch strips, and you should have 7 of those. And we're going to sew those together exactly the same way. We're going to do the just long pieces together. And you'll notice, so whenever you have a selvage like this, where you can actually see the writing, I kind of tend to put those together because I don't want that, I don't want to grab one. On the other end, it's much narrower. And I don't want to grab one and think that I can sew along there and then the white shows, because that's terrible. So I try to put my whitest ends together. I know that reverses the pattern, but on this one particularly, it won't matter at all. Not one little bit. And I give myself plenty of room sewing those selvages together. There are people I know that save selvages too. You might have those already cut off and just be saving them for some special project. I always think it's a good idea. Then I have a whole bunch of them saved, and then I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, or I make some bags or something in it. But it's a fun idea. I like that. I'm pretty thrifty. A long time ago, a girl sent me a bag that was made all with selvages, and I love it. I use it to carry my cords when I'm traveling. It's my cord bag, and it carries all my my electronic cords and things like that. So we have to keep plugged in while we're going along. All right. Now we're just going to trim off this selvage like I did the other one and clip them apart like this. And because we've added that first little border, these are just going to go on so slick and smooth because you're not worrying about the little edges of your blocks or anything like that. It's just a straight piece of fabric, and you're just going to be able to put these right on. Again, there are measurements in the back of your pattern. Right here, it will tell you exactly how big to cut your borders and that sort of thing. Right here on this last page. And so you can cut them exactly, or you can be really careful. Now, if you put your borders on like I do, and you lay it down on the floor and it is not flat, you need to take those off and try again. It is kind of a learned skill. I know exactly how tight to keep that top border to keep my borders from ruffling. So it's not the best way to teach a beginner, but for most of us, we're kind of lazy sewers, and that's how we do it. So, do it however you feel comfortable. For me, this works well. So now we're just lining up 2 straight cuts of fabric, and we're just going to be able to sail down here and just put those on. So again, we're doing sides and then top and bottom. Done. Ta-da! Best day ever. All right. Now let's take a look at it and see what we got here. This is the best part, you guys. Look at this. Look at that. We did it. It's been a year. We've been working on it and we did it. It's all together. Now, I have a surprise for you because I actually made another top and I sent it to Quilting, and I had the video team go with it and just follow it kind of on its journey. All right, so this is my finished quilt, and it's actually in a couple of stages, so I can show you all the finishing things. First of all, when your quilt comes back, you may or may not need to trim it. Now, if you need to trim it, sometimes, you know, the long armor will trim them, sometimes they won't. But if they come back and they need to be trimmed, they'll have quite a bit of batting, and your backing fabric will be on there, you know, that whole thing. So what I do when I trim my quilts is I line up with I use this line right here. So I use this line right here as my measurement. And so I lay my ruler on there, I find that measurement, and then I'm just gonna, you know, I tug and pull my quilt to make sure that it's like all even, and then I will trim this edge right here, like this. And just make sure that's a nice clean edge for you to put your binding on. That's how I do that. All right, so let's talk about the binding for a minute. So I have my quilt partially bound as well, but attaching the binding, sewing the binding together, that is, you know, that can be a deal for some people. So you're gonna get in your box, you're gonna get these 2.5-inch strips, and this is your binding. And how I put mine together is I always put it together before I press it. And so I got in that habit because if you have like a solid binding, it has no wrong or right sides, and so I would get one with the seam up and one with the seam down. It would just get all a mess. So I sew these all together first, and what I do is I lay mine together in the plus method, and then I just sew from this corner to this corner right here. And so this is where if you have diagonal tape on your sewing machine, it's super, super helpful because you can just sew from one corner to the next. And I'm just going to go across here. And the reason we put our binding strips together like this in this plus method is because of the bulk. It takes so much bulk out of it. If you do it a straight seam and then you fold it over, all those seams lay on top of each other. Where if we do it this plus method and you just cut it like this, 1/4 inch, when you open it up, that seam is diagonal and it's not ever going to stack on top of itself. It gives you, it's just so much better as far as you know, making sure that we have a lot of, you know, our materials spread out over the whole thing. And so it's way easy. So then you're going to take your whole strip like this, and you're just going to iron it right in half. And I just am going to iron this one right in half like this, and I will try to do it this way so you can get a better view on what I'm doing. And I just slide it across my board. There's lots of tools for helping with binding, and I have some of them, and I like some of them. But basically, you're just ironing it right in half like this, and you'll do that to all 7 of your strips. One thing to remember is that, this is just a little tip, if you used 7 strips of border, you're going to need 7 strips of binding. And so that's just a great little measuring tip there. All right, now I have my binding sewn on most of my quilt right here, but I left this last little part so that I could show you how to end it and show you how to go around a corner. So let me grab my strips here, and then I'm going to open up my quilt so that I can get at it easier. There we go. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to sew this on. And what I do is I lay my binding strip like this right along the edge of my trimmed quilt, and I'm going to put my put this under here, and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch, but a little bit fat, a little fat 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to sew these down like this. And I make sure that my binding stays on the edge. My 1/4 of an inch is pretty consistent, and we are just sewing around it. So I'm almost to the corner here, and I'm going to go up till I'm 1/4 of an inch from the corner, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. And then what I like to do is leave my needle down, and I'm going to turn it, and I'm turn it straight, and I'm going to sew right off the corner, just like that. And then I'm going to turn my whole quilt around this way, and I'm going to fold this back, use my thumb and fold that back, make sure it goes straight across the top, and then I'm just going to sew down the other side like this. That will give you that perfect miter look that everybody loves. So we're going to sew right down the side. And I should be pretty close to my ending piece, because the ending of it that's what everybody has trouble with and they struggle with. And I struggled with it for a long time until I learned a really cool way to do it. I actually learned it at my guild. So I've left a little tail on here when I started, and I'm going to leave a little tail on here when I finish. So I like to give myself a little bit of wiggle room. So I have about, well, it's probably about 12 inches, but I have this little tail here where I started. So here's the secret of how to end your binding. However wide your binding is, our binding is 2.5. That's how much you're going to lap it over. So I'm going to lap mine over here at 2.5. And so you can get your little ruler if you want to and just measure 2.5. So I know it's going to be right here. And what I like to do is I just like to measure 2.5, and I'm going to clip it right there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move this out here, and we're going to sew these together again, just like we sewed the binding together. And so we're going to do the plus method. So this top piece, it's going to go straight across. The bottom piece, we're going to go straight up. And I like my binding to be a little bit snug. And so I'm just going to come in just a hair from the corner like that. So it just overlaps, a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. And I don't always get this right on the first time, but, I'm pretty close. So we'll see how I do. So we're going to sew across this, like this, corner to corner, just like we sewed our binding together. And then what I do is I pull it like this. And I see if it's going to lay down or if it's not quite snug enough. And I honestly don't think mine is quite snug enough. So I'm going to do it again, which means I'm going to pull my thread out of here and just pull these apart. And I'm going to, now when I sew it together again, so you get a double chance to see how to do this, I'm going to take it over just a little bit more. So I was at, about 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to go at 1/4. And so now we're just going to do the same thing again. And we're going to sew it down like this. Sew it corner to corner. And then we're going to look at it and give it a little pull. Now that feels much better to me because it's going to lay down nice and flat. So now I'm going to trim these pieces. Don't ever trim until you test. Test first, then trim. Then we can lay our quilt on here, and we can just sew it down. Just sew it down. Now, if you ever get it too short, here's a tip. If you ever get it too short, just take your binding off for a little ways and use a longer way to sew it on, because again, remember, the feed dogs will take in more of that quilt than the binding, and it will work out. You just need a little bit more room to do it. So there, that came together so nice. And we're going to look on this side and see how beautiful that came together. So now you're going to go to your little gift and you're going to get your little needle. We all have our favorites. Again, mine is this little John James. I think it's about probably an 8 or a 9. I like them kind of small. But as I've gotten older, oh, guess what's happened? Look at this. I have to use these to see my needle. And even worse, sometimes it still doesn't work. So I love this needle threader. I don't know if you guys know about these needle threaders, but I love them. And they only work with certain needles. You have to have an oval eye needle to work with. And it says that right on the package. But people will buy them and they'll be like, mine doesn't work, mine doesn't work. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our needle in the needle slot right here. And then we're going to lay our thread right across here. And then you just push the button right here. And like magic, this is threaded. This has saved me hours of time, literally hours of time, because I sit there with my glasses on and I still can't really see it. And it's just kind of a mess. All right, let me show you how I knot a thread. So what I do is I pull my thread like this, and I wrap it around my finger, and I cross it. I make like a little X, and I let this bottom thread go up to the top, and then I roll it off my finger and just pull the knot down. And that gives me just a little knot. So now my needle is threaded, and I pull them pretty long so they're close together, and I'm ready to bind. I've got my glasses. And I'm just going to run my needle in under this fold and put my knot on the back. And I'll just push it under so it stays under there. I'm then going to pull my binding around to meet the stitch edge. And what I do then is I go right in where my thread came out, and I come out about 1/4 of an inch still in that fold, just like this. And then right where my thread came out, I go right back in and come out on the edge of the fold, just like that. And this is a binding stitch, and it hides it perfectly. And like sometimes you'll have threads that are coming off the edge of your quilt, and you can just tuck them up there under that binding. But you always go right in, and I don't go all the way through. I just go right in under that layer, maybe catch a little batting, and pull that through like that. And so it just works so slick. Oh, look here. See, I have this little thread. I'm just going to tuck that up with my needle, and I'm just going to keep going. And I was binding before the binding clips came out, so I am not accustomed to using those. Lots of people love them. That's why we put them in there. But I just go along like this, and I just kind of scooch my fingers back as I get to that point, and then I come over and I fold a good piece of it like this. Also, if you saw Natalie's finishing stitch on the flange, sometimes I will just put a bead of glue on here and glue that down, and then I can just come home and I can just bind away because it's all folded down. So that's how you bind it, and I've just got a little bit more here to do to finish up my quilt, and it will be ready to snuggle someone or hang on the wall or whatever it is I want to do with it. But I want to take a minute now because we've all been working on, and in our group, which can I say, by the way, our group on Facebook, that's been one of the sweetest things that's happened to me since the Missouri Star All-Stars, because, I mean, that is a big group, but they are supportive, and they are kind, and they are helpful, and a lot of times they'll say, Jenny, how do you do this? And by the time I get there, it's done. It's already done. You know, somebody's answered them, somebody's told them, and I'm always like, perfect, you know. And so that's been one of the sweetest things. But lots of you are making them different colors. So I just want to take a minute and show off my two. You guys know I did it in Halloween, and I also did it in red, white, and blue. And so I have these over here to show you. And if one of you guys will help me hold these up, that would be great. So the first one is I actually did a couple of these Halloween style. And you saw on if you follow my Instagram, the Halloween, wait, we got it upside down. The Halloween is, I made two of these because I liked it so much. It was supposed to be my giveaway quilt, but I liked it so much that I didn't want to give it away. So I had to make one for myself. So this is the Halloween one. And this is when I say, I love this pattern. I just think this looks gorgeous in Halloween. And it's just so much fun, and it just came together so well. And I was able to give one. Natalie was the kid who won that one. And then I also did it in the patriotic colors. And one of the things that I wanted to try on this one, which I didn't know if it would work. And I kept asking people, do you think this is going to work? Do you think this is going to work? And none of us were sure. But I used different backgrounds on every block. And so I'll let you see how that looks. And this is the top. Thank you, Ashley, for helping me. This is Ashley. And look at this red, white, and blue. Look how gorgeous this looks. And even with all we can even pin this up here. Let's put a pin in there. Let's make sure we get it lined up, or somebody will go crazy who's linear out there. Yours is a little bit higher. There we go. All right. So anyway, look at all the different backgrounds that I used in this quilt. They're all batiks, they're all soft, but I think it gives it kind of texture and feeling, and I really love how it came together. So I have loved making this. I love this pattern. It's obvious to you that I've made it several times. But I've really loved being able to spend this year with you guys. It has been so much fun. I love that group, that all-star group. So I'm almost done with mine. I will take this home and bind it while I'm sitting in the chair next to my guy watching television. But I did tell you I was going to give you a quote. And for me, this summarized kind of this year. Now this quote comes from my friend Dana. And she put a post up, and I hope it's okay that I share it. But the quote is, if we never step out of our comfort zone, we will never find out what we're capable of. And I think for most of us this year, we found out we were capable of a lot more than we thought we were. And so I hope you've enjoyed this year as much as I have. I just have chills right now even talking to you about it, because it's been a special time for me and a special year, and I've loved being able to spend every month with you, and then following up with that live. You guys know I love live. Anyway, there won't be a live this year because it falls right on Christmas, but I hope you're able to finish your quilts, and I want to start seeing them popping up on that Facebook site. So anyway, you guys, love to all of you. I hope you have wonderful holidays. Stay well and healthy. And don't you worry, I have another great one for next year. We'll see you later.